Well, I imagine it had been a sleepless night. You know, one of those nights when you toss and turn and you never actually fall asleep. I'm pretty sure probably early in the morning she said, I give up, and she got up and she got her clothes on. And she decided to walk to the only place that it made sense to go. In her grief and in her pain, Mary Magdalene walked to the grave, the tomb of Jesus. When she got there, she immediately noticed that the stone in front of the tomb had been moved. And so she just started running to find Peter and John. She found them and she told them that the tomb had been disturbed, and they had all worried about this. This is what they feared, that grave robbers would take his body. This is what they were worried about. And so the two men ran straight to the tomb. John was a bit faster. He got there first, but he didn't go into the tomb. He just stopped at the doorway and he kind of tried to peer into the darkness. But when Peter finally arrived, he just ran straight into the tomb. And immediately he noticed that on the ground were these pieces of linen that had been wrapped around Jesus' body, and now they were just lying in the ground. But a strange thing was that the burial cloth that wrapped around his head was folded and set aside in a corner. The men looked at that empty tomb, and they just knew it had been stolen. You see, no disciple expected Jesus to be raised at this point. And so they just did what they could do. They decided to go back home. So I'm going to read now our Easter passage, which is the very next verse. And Mary stood outside near the tomb crying. And as she cried, she bent down to look into the tomb. And she saw two angels dressed in white seated where the body of Jesus had been, one at the head and one at the foot. And the angels asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" And she replied, "They've taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they've put him." And as soon as she said this, she turned around and she saw Jesus standing there, but she didn't know it was Jesus. And Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who are you looking for?" And thinking he was a gardener, she replied, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you put him, and I will get him." And Jesus replied to her, "Mary." And she turned and said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. And Jesus said to her, "Don't hold on to me, for I haven't yet gone up to my Father. Go to my brothers and sisters and tell them, I'm going up to my Father and your Father. I'm to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene left and announced to the disciples, "I've seen the Lord." And then she told them what he had said to her. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So all during the season of Lent, and if you're not sure what Lent is the 6 weeks prior to Easter Day. And all through that season, we've had a sermon series about a very important question. The question is, why did Jesus have to die on the cross? You see, that's a very significant question, because a lot of people who struggle to find faith are upset just by that, because they said, why would I want to serve a God who allowed his own son to suffer and die? It's a block to a lot of people. So we spent 6 weeks talking about various theories of why Jesus died on the cross. They're called atonement theories. And when we were all done, we had covered 10 different theories. They gave us various reasons, explanations, so to speak. And when we heard all of them together, the thing that rose up from that teaching was not that God was this harsh God, but quite the opposite. That God was loving, and he was this presence in our lives of grace, that he had seen us, that he understood us, and he accepted us even in our brokenness, on our very bad, worst days, on the day we made the worst decisions of our lives or the worst behavior of our lives. He still loved us. And he understood that we needed for him to know what it is to suffer, so that we would trust that he understands our experience of life. So it was it was a good series for us because we began to realize God is loving. So today I want to slightly shift from the question, why did Jesus have to die on the cross, to a slightly different question, which is, what has Jesus saved us for? I mean, the cross and the resurrection were never meant to be the end of the story. They weren't. They were actually the beginning of the story. So last year in the New York Times, a gentleman interviewed Sir Anthony Hopkins. He's a very well-known actor. And the article was about him finding God and how he was released of his addiction. So I want to tell you a little bit what he said in that interview. He said it was quite a few years ago, I think it was the 70s, and he was in California, and he was out one night and he was driving, and he was in a blackout state. He was totally under the influence. He didn't know what he was doing. And when he woke up and he realized that he had been driving, he had no recollection of driving, he got really scared. He realized he could have killed somebody, or he could have killed himself, though he was pretty sure he didn't care if he killed himself at that point. But it hit him all of a sudden hard. And so he drove to a party in Beverly Hills, and he said when he got there, he went in and he ran into his ex-agent. And as soon as he saw his face, this person, someone that knew him, he said, "I need help." He said it was exactly 11 p.m. And he said, this is the part that gets a little spooky. Because he said, at that very moment, the minute he said, "I need help," he said, some deep, powerful thought or voice spoke to me from inside and said, "It's all over. Now you can start living." And I like that story, and it makes sense to me. Lately, I feel on social media there's a lot of celebrities who are telling how they have overcome their addictions, which is wonderful because when you're in the middle of addiction, it can be so hopeless. But there's like a pattern there. When people suddenly overcome an addiction or they survive maybe something traumatic in their lives, they have this strong sense of gratitude. It's like a new lease on life. They're like, now I want to live a life I'm proud of, or now I want to help people because I somehow survived this horrible season of my life. Now I'm ready to be a good person or to make a difference in the world. And that's a normal thing to feel. That's a normal thing to think about. Yet I got to make a confession to you today. When I hear the Easter story, that isn't always my response. I have often made my Easter story more egocentric. I make it more about me. Like, and I think about Easter morning, I think I'm so grateful that I now have a chance at heaven. Or when I see an Easter morning, I think now I know that my sins can be forgiven. Or now I know Jesus is my friend. Do you catch the common denominator? Me, I. Now I know. And I've often made an Easter journey about me and my Jesus. And it wasn't until I was in seminary when I had a professor named Brian Russell who said these words. He didn't use these exact words. It's been too long ago that I can't remember exactly. But what he said to me stayed with me the rest of my life. And basically he said, our faith journey of Easter morning is only the beginning of the journey on our way to the world. It doesn't stop at an empty tomb. It begins there. Now that's startling to me because it turns out Easter morning isn't just about me and my Jesus, but actually instead it's challenging me that it's supposed to be about me and the world and the difference I make in the world and the light I show in the world and the ways that I'm salt in the world. It's not about me and Jesus, it's about me on my way to the world. So I want to read to you out of 2 Corinthians chapter 5, and I'm going to read out a very loose translation, but I like it. It's called The Message, and I want you to hear it from there because it makes it pretty simple to understand. Our firm decision is to work from this focused center. One man died for everyone. That puts everyone in the same boat. He included everyone in his death so that everyone could also be included in his life, a resurrection life, a far better life than people ever lived on their own. So that's what he gives us on Easter morning, a far better life. And how do we express our gratitude to that? So it was just after World War II, and there was a couple, and they were going to a funeral. Their good friend's son had not made it home from the war. And so they were going to go to a service at a church for him that day. And the wife was telling her husband, this family is dedicating one of the windows at the church, I assume like a stained glass window, in honor of their son. They are giving $50,000 to the church. Now imagine $50,000 at the period of after the end of World War II. That would have been a lot of money. And she was saying that is so nice of them to be doing that gift in honor of their son. That's just so amazing. And then she sort of stopped talking mid-sentence, and she looked at her husband and she said, what are we going to give? And he said, what are you talking about? We didn't lose our son. Our son came home from the war. He's alive. What are you talking about? What are we going to give? And she said, that's what I mean. Our friends lost their son and they are giving $50,000. We got our son back and we're not giving anything. I mean, she's not wrong. Do we owe the risen Savior something? 2 Corinthians 5, a little further down into that chapter, there are these words. God put the world square with himself through the Messiah, giving the world a fresh start by offering forgiveness of sins. God has given us the task of telling everyone what he is doing. We are Christ's representatives. So it turns out we do have a job. And so I want to ask you this question, what's the loudest thing we do? Now, I'm not talking about a booming voice. I'm talking about our actions. What is the loudest thing we do with our actions? Because our actions are what really speak for us. We can say whatever we want, but it's our actions that are always telling. Let me give you an example. I know a lot of parents really worry about their elementary age and their teenage kids because of comparison culture. Social media puts so much pressure on parents, and they worry about it, and I hear parents talk about it. It is a true fear. But the reality is those same parents really have a hard time putting their own phones down. You see, we talk with our actions. We're truthful about our struggles because we often give in to them. And so I have to ask you, what are your actions saying about your faith? If you love Jesus, and if you're grateful for Easter morning, are you able to be kind or extend mercy to the person who cuts you off on the road? Are you able to give some of your resources to the poor that you see around you? Are you forgiving somebody who hurts you, or are you just holding on to that? Our actions can be pretty loud. There is a quote that Mother Teresa said that I absolutely love. It's this: it is impossible to love God without loving our neighbor. Do you hear that? That is really challenging. Think about the one person in your life that you cannot stand right now. Think about him. That's how much you love God. Isn't that scary? That is so convicting to me. But that's the reality. And that's always been a reality for us. And so Jesus helps us with this reality. We're told to love our neighbor, but oh, it's so hard. And he gives us this great story. He said there was this man, and this man was on a road, a lonely road, and he gets beat up. And he's left lying on the ground, going to die. And he's hopeless and without hope. And then all of a sudden he sees off in the distance somebody walking towards him. And as the guy got closer, he said, oh, those are religious clothes. This is a religious man. That's a priest. Oh, I'm saved now. Now I'll be fine. But the priest got closer and closer and just walked right by him. And the guy was without hope. But then he saw another person coming down the road, and he thought, oh, this is it. And as the guy got closer, he said, that's a good Jew. That Jew loves God. That person is clearly going to stop and help me. I know I'm going to be saved. But that man, too, also just kept on walking. Then he saw a third guy, but that was kind of upsetting because he saw who that person was and he didn't like that man. He would never do anything for a man like that. He disapproved of that man. He wasn't sure he wanted help from that man, but guess what? That was the guy who actually stopped, picked him up, got him to an inn, cleaned his wounds, paid for him to stay there while he rested and healed. And Jesus is basically teaching us two things here. First, he's saying, who is your neighbor? Well, your neighbor is anybody who needs your help, whoever you see. But then he gives you even more. He shows you how to be a neighbor. Well, you're a neighbor with your resources. You're a neighbor with your time and your energy. You're a neighbor with your efforts. But even with that story, sometimes it's really hard to know how to love your neighbor. This faith stuff's a lot of work and it's hard, and we don't always feel sure. So I want to share to you how I practice my faith, how I try to be a neighbor out of my own brokenness. These are places where I struggle, but I do struggle. I try not to give into it. So here is how I struggle to love my neighbor. Loving my neighbor means not taking out the stress of the day on my husband Gary when I come home at night. Loving my neighbor means helping the homeless person that I tend to be worried they're going to waste my money on alcohol or drugs. Loving my neighbor is praying for the politician that I dislike the most. Loving my neighbor is giving time to that one person in my life who exhausts me. Loving my neighbor is turning off whatever I'm streaming and taking a moment to text people that I know are going through a bad season. Loving my neighbor is forgiving the person who never apologized, yet still hurt me deeply. And loving my neighbor is giving of my time in service either to my community or to my church, even when I'd rather be at home off the clock. You see, loving my neighbor is the willingness to share of my finances, my time, my energy, and even my heart as an expression of gratitude to the one who saved me on Easter morning. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. We're going to